Hi guys, welcome to the Me, Myself and Mine podcast. Today's guest is Simon Jeffries, a former Special Forces operative and now owner of a health and wellbeing company called The Natural Edge. Today, we're going to be discussing stress and emotional resilience and how important emotional resilience is in combating the stresses of daily life. We hope you guys enjoy the podcast. Hi Simon.
How's it going, guys?
Yeah,
Good, thanks. Yeah,
really good, really good. First off, would you like to just give the viewers and the listeners a little bit more information about yourself, possibly about your background and, what you're currently working on with The Natural Edge?
Yeah, sure. So my background, probably the most pertinent part is my service in the military before I moved over to doing what I'm doing now with The Natural Edge. So I joined the Royal Marines after university at 24. I did a year sort of normal service, if you'd like, and then I did selection to, it's basically a tactical signaller, but working with the Special Forces group. So you're still a Royal Marine, you do a 6-month selection course, and then you get to work Special Forces doing the kind of signals component between whatever's happening on the ground and back to wherever the headquarters is. I did that for a couple of years, and then I did full selection and finished the rest of my career serving with Special Boat Service. I then decided that although I loved the job, I loved what I was doing, that I wanted another challenge. I felt like I'd done everything that I wanted to do while in the military, and there was still something else or other things that I wanted to do, even though at the time that I left, I wasn't entirely sure what that looked like. So I left. My partner at the time got a job in London. So I decided to see if I could do the kind of normal office type stuff. Got a job in a consultancy. And although I was very fortunate, and the company that I chose to go with was great, and I got on really well with the boss there, who was mega supportive. And I did stay with him for a couple of years, but even after, I think it was literally a week, I kind of made the decision that there was no way that this path was for me. And I teamed up with another guy that I'd served in the military with, who was just about to leave. And we basically we decided that we were going to take the route of starting a business. And our only two criteria were we wanted it to be online so that we were geographically independent, and something that was scalable. And then we went down the classic entrepreneur path of trying a few different ideas. We had one that we kind of worked on for a year or so, actually it's probably more like a year and a half, a piece of software randomly in the online trading space, because we thought we saw an opportunity there. But fast forward to when it finished, and basically we put a lot of time and pretty much all of our savings into it, and it kind of came to an end. So that was a bit of a blow, and it was kind of a decision point, I guess, whether we carried on pursuing what we were doing or go and get normal jobs, for want of a better term. But we did carry on, and we decided at that point that we should do something that we actually cared about, and were passionate about, which for us is health and fitness. And that's how The Natural Edge was born. So we started T&E, and it's gone through a few iterations from what it initially started out being, to where we are now, which is basically, it's an online platform that people can come to, and it's a complete approach to health. So we have courses that cover mindset, nutrition components, the training components, and then we also do a lot of things like sleep and building habits. So the idea is that people will come in and transform the health, the point where they're at now, to somewhere far better. Alongside that, we do run some events. We're big advocates of getting into the outdoors, so we do things called micro adventures, which was coined, the term was coined by British explorer Al Humphreys. We basically just take people out, do some wild camping, wild swimming, and then we also do a couple of retreats a year. And that's essentially where kind of we are now with it. That's up to speed.
I presume the journey that you've just told us has had many ups and downs and stressful periods that you've had to overcome.
Yeah, it's in a lot of ways starting or going down the path, the kind of entrepreneur path, the building a business path has been harder in lots of ways than the military and doing selection was. And yeah, it's absolutely had a lot of ups and downs, and some dark days, which it's just part of the parcel, I think, with this journey. But you certainly can't, if you don't have a real desire to fulfill whatever your vision is, then those days will, it's not enough to do this, I think, unless you've got a really strong drive for money and that really drives you. It's not enough to do it, because there's far easier ways to make cash. So you need to actually care about the idea that you were trying to, I guess, make into a reality and bring into the world.
So on that note, say, obviously, with all of these challenges, Sam, you've had, it is all about being emotionally resilient. So how would you define emotional resilience, and how have you used this to cope with the challenges, as Dan, alluded to, the ups and downs of your business life?
Yeah, I think, you need a great deal of, yes, both physical and mental resilience, emotional resilience. And I think you're right, probably emotional resilience is in a way more important than the physical side, although you can't divorce the two, because, which we can move on to later, a huge component in building resilience comes from health. Your health forms that foundation, and you're going to find it incredibly hard to have emotional resilience if you're in poor health. So for me, emotional resilience is you're essentially able to cope with the stresses and curveballs of life, which it doesn't matter who you are, we all have them, and we have them to varying degrees. So it's able to have those events happen, and still maintain, I guess, a healthy outlook on life, but just to generally stay in a stable position where you're not having these huge drops in performance, I guess, where you basically, your output or how you're functioning is massively reduced because you've been hit with whatever the obstacle is. Obviously there's big degrees of that, and there's some things in life that are going to knock anyone sideways no matter what it is. But if we're talking, in a general day-to-day, the pressures of work, stuff with relationships, your kind of the general upsets that happen, then that's really what I'm talking about. Be able to, maintain that balance, maintain positive attitude, and stay focused on what you're trying to achieve.
So on that, that's really interesting. Would you say there's a different emotional resilience you needed for your work with the Special Forces compared to building a business?
I'd say it ties into it. It all comes back to the fundamental. I think the fundamental principles are the same, and it's dealing with the same. Stress is stress in itself. It's the events that cause it. I would say one of the big differences, and in a way why building the business is harder. As humans, we're designed to deal with acute stress periods of the fight or flight. Something happens and then it's gone. And a lot of the military is like that. It's, long periods of boredom and then shorter periods of intense, whatever it is, whether that's on a course or on operations. Whereas building a business, and you could probably apply it to daily life as well, especially in the modern world, we're always getting bombarded. It's this chronic stress that we're getting bombarded with. It's the small things every single day. And as humans, we're not very well designed to deal with that. So coming up with strategies to mitigate that, I think, is one of the biggest things that you can do to make yourself more emotionally resilient, and I guess more emotionally balanced.
Mm-hmm. And would you say that there have been times during your, whether that's your entrepreneurial career or your past military career, that you realised that you needed to up your emotional resilience? You know, there might have been times that things were getting too chronic.
I don't think it's. I don't know whether the term upping the emotional resilience, or maybe it is because it all ties in, but there's definitely periods when you notice that there's symptoms that stress is getting to you, which we all have, whether that is, you're starting to be unproductive with the work that you're doing, you're snapping at your partner or family or the people close to you. Sleep goes, you're starting to eat the worst food. It's all these little things that you can kind of, once you bring awareness to it, you see the signs of it. And that's when, I guess, and to take, analogy from the military, it's taking that tactical pause, that step back, when things are starting to get out of control, taking a look at the overall picture, and then knowing the strategies, I guess having the knowledge to put the right strategies in place to then get back on track, and rebalance things out.
Yeah, I suppose when we are stressed, if we don't have anybody around us that's, close with us that can have that conversation, sometimes we don't think rationally, and you wouldn't necessarily notice that you're in that predicament until it's
So what Dan's suggesting is also that it sounds like you've turned a lot of, as we all have, but especially with some of the extremes you've possibly gone through in business and operations, you've turned your failures around, looked at it from a different perspective, would you say? It's just feedback. It's not finite. It's not a failure.
Yeah, I think that's Matt. The point that you've hit on there is huge, and it's probably one of the, it's the old growth versus fixed mindset, which sits at really the seat of everything we do. And I think what you said there is probably one of the key principles, that if you can change how you view failure, it affects everything in your life. If you do see things as either pass or fail, and that if you fail, that's really negative, and that's a reflection on your character and your self-worth, you're going to have an incredibly tough time throughout the entire of your life. And unfortunately, our education system is pretty set up, and our culture generally, we punish when things go wrong, as opposed to, failure is an integral part of learning and going forward. There is no one in any field, whatever they're doing, who hasn't reached the point that they have without failing, thousands of times. So yeah, I think that's absolutely key. You need to see a failure as just the opportunity to break it down, take those parts, work on it, and then go again.
And that, what go on, say?
I was just going to say, with what you're saying there, Simon, it's a shame. I've worked in the education environment as well in the past, and it's as we've all been children, you're encouraged almost to sort of fail, but as you become an adult, you can't fail. You are punished even more so when you become an adult. Would you agree with that? It's sort of,
yeah, completely. I think it is, as you move through. We lose so many things as kids. So I was talking to a friend the other day about play. He's just started. He's like, I've been going out on my mountain bike with the same kids that I grew up with, because he's moved back area. And he said it's like being 10 years old again. He said you come back and you feel amazing because you've just had so much fun. And I think we do, we lose that because we do, like you said, play becomes something no one wants to. It's that fear, I guess, of how people perceive you, of being, stupid or whatever it is. So it probably ties in with the failure type of thing, which again, it's our own perceptions of that really hold us back, and our fear of being judged by others. you know, it's the, you kind of see it more. I mean, the military is a bit of a bubble, and especially I was thinking about this the other day. A good example of how we fear failure is when, you know, if we say people go on a first aid course or whatever it is through work or whatever the example, and they ask for a volunteer to come and do something, and no one ever, you know, no one wants to be that first person. As soon as a couple of people have done it, people are more comfortable. Whereas I was trying to think, you know, in general in the military, there's definitely more, and especially where I was serving, more of that kind of attitude of, yeah, whatever, just, you know, it doesn't matter if they don't care about looking stupid, they're just willing to give it a go and see what happens. I think it's probably because there's a big, you know, the military is very, very much no cuff too tough. You know, the amount of things that are cuffed, people have this view that it's a very slick machine, and honestly it's pretty much held together by gaffer tape and just bodged up things, because you have to, because things go wrong so often, so you just get used to it. And I think that kind of attitude then pervades through it, that, you know, you just cuff it to make it work.
Yeah. And I think, you know, talking about our perceptions of situations, and we are going to go through negatives, that's just a part of life. Would you say that, you know, the recent times that we've all faced, you know, everybody's been through it with COVID-19, and it's been very uncertain and challenging, but would you say that the way stress affects one person is very different to another? And then could that also be due to our perceptions of life and stress? And
yeah, no, I think, I mean, one of the big things that we make the point of with the natural edge is that every single one of us is individual. And although there are broad rules that will help us all, you know, all three of us sat here now, the exact way that I eat or train or whatever, you know, isn't probably going to be right for either of you, and, you know, vice versa. We can take the principles, but then you need to have a degree of self-experimentation and also just begin to understand how your mind and body works. And so, you know, stress, as we said before, there's a lot of common symptoms that will come out, but how that manifests in each of us, you know, some people when they get stressed might draw into themselves and become more insular and withdrawn, whereas other people might manifest it by being angry or, you know, kind of aggressive towards other people. So how you deal with it within yourself is something, like you said, because it's hard when you're in that situation. It's sometimes hard to actually notice you're in it and get that outside view. But I think the more aware you can become of your own personality and how you do react to things, the more likely you will be able to spot them. And yeah, what you said there, you know, I'm a big fan of the Stoic philosophy, and it is, I mean, you can't even argue it. Everything, there is no, it's almost, you know, they say there's no even right or wrong in the world. There's just stuff, there's events, and it's how we all interpret it, which you can see, you know, throughout the world with different cultures. I mean, the easiest example is, you know, jokes. We'll go to a comedy club, you know, someone tells a joke and one person finds it hilarious, another one finds it extremely offensive. You know, the joke hasn't changed, it's exactly the same. It's just because we all look at the world through our own narratives and lens, through our, you know, biology, childhood, our experiences, then it is completely up to us how no one can make you angry, make you emotional. You can only do that yourself, and you do that by how you interpret what they say or how their actions are. Obviously it's really easy to say that, and we all, you know, we all get angry, upset, whatever it is. But again, you can definitely practice the kind of that Stoic approach. And again, it comes back to awareness of catching yourself when you are starting to react to something, and then just taking that moment and going, you know, why am I reacting like this? What is it that's caused it? And ask those questions.
yeah, and then I think there's, you know, many things that we can implement. You know, they say control the controllables, you know, because the last few months have been very out of our control. And do you think that sometimes people allow themselves to fall into stress when they shouldn't?
Yeah, I mean, definitely controlling the controllables is something I wrote about recently, and that's a huge part of it. I think I, it's a tough way, saying we allow ourselves to move, fall into stress. It's no one wants to be stressed. No one wants to feel like that. And there are definitely things that you can put in place to, like we said, things that you can practice to make that less likely. But even, the best will in the world, there's always going to be times that it does happen. But controlling, doing what you can, especially like you said in this current situation, again, we're all, and I do it, everyone does it, we're really guilty of worrying about stuff that isn't out of our control. But the more you can bring that in, and I guess, it's a military analogy to it as well, as you just need to focus on what is happening. You need a view. It's not, when we talk about this, I think, it's probably good to make the distinction that it's not getting complete tunnel vision. You need to still have a view of the big picture and what's going on, but having, that's just, you need that knowledge, but then the actual actions you take need to be directed on the things that you can control at that time, and that will evolve as whatever situation moves forward. So it's being able to have the bird's eye view and then act on the things that you can control in that moment, to move you towards that bigger picture that you want to happen.
Excellent. So as we're talking about, I mean, stress is everywhere, isn't it? We've just been talking about that. It affects us all completely differently. But what do you think, what things can we do, or interventions would you suggest that we can use? I mean, would you say it's about communication, being transparent, open, maybe possibly journaling information down?
Yeah, I think there's probably, again, I think there's probably different angles that you can sort of attack it from. In the first instance, I sort of touched on it earlier, is that the better health you have in the beginning as your foundation, the better starting point you've got for fighting stress anyway. Take two people, one who's getting good sleep, predominantly eating good foods, and by good foods I just mean you're not fueling on pure junk and sugar and processed. You're partaking in some kind of regular movement, getting sunlight, getting outside, basically doing all the things that we've kind of evolved to do. We talk about the natural edge being, we've all got health in our DNA. We've all evolved to be healthy. We've all, we're very hardy and robust as a species. It's kind of built into us. And if you just put the practices into place to unlock that, then you're setting yourself up to be in a good place anyway, as opposed to, if you are doing basically the opposite of that, getting bad sleep, on your screens all the time, eating the junk food, sitting down, poor posture, bad breathing, not getting out any regular movement, straight away you put those two people in a stressful situation. And one, you basically have less of a leeway, I guess is the best way to have it. You've got less reserves to cope with anything on top of what you're doing. And then on top of that, the exact things that you were talking about, I mean, the big things that I've definitely found, meditation I've found to be massive. Just 10 minutes a day. I use the Waking Up app by Sam Harris. If you talk to me about meditation even a few years ago, I would have probably just completely written it off, because it's still, I think it's slightly changing with people like Tim Ferriss and the interviews that he does, showing how many top performers from across, every realm of sport, business, performances, how many people are using this and finding it effective. But it still has that kind of like hippie-ish connotation, and it's not really, for especially blokes doing it. It doesn't, people would rather look on Instagram and see the kind of like, hardcore gym videos, as opposed to something around meditation. But in actual fact, the benefits that you can get from that are massive, because the mind is primary and it drives everything.
Definitely. I mean, that's integral with our business as well, the meditation, and hopefully, well, I think as you've just alluded to, it's meditation's becoming more mainstream, and we'll discussions about it. If you think about meditation, it's really about effective breathing, isn't it? Controlling the nervous system, which alleviates that stress. But because
I think it's a few. Yeah, I mean, breathing definitely plays a massive part. I think the biggest thing for me is that meditation reinforces the point that it's bringing awareness to you, just being. You're not doing anything. You're just being able to sit and watch. We have our mindset course was done by a guy named Tom Foxley, he's brilliant. He was a Royal Marines. He kind of went through a whole process in life of badly bullied as a child, hugely lacking self-confidence, wanted to join the Royal Marines Reserves, and went through this kind of whole journey to get there, and then dedicated himself to learning all about mindset. And he kind of moved a lot into the CrossFit niche with it. He's coached some of the high level. Brent Fikowski is probably his most famous client, and he now does a lot with that with Brent's own coaching program. But Tom's approach, and I still use it every day, the very basic first thing you do is something called observe your inner athlete, which is, it's, I guess, a form of journaling, but it's basically a stream of consciousness. And the whole point being, you're trying to become aware of what your narratives, what stories you hold and tell yourself about the world. Because until you do that, it's going to be incredibly difficult to make any changes. We put a huge emphasis on the mindset side in the Natural Edge, because in reality, it's the biggest thing for most people that are holding them back. Most people have a general idea with training or diet or whatever it is, what they need to do, but they just can't get themselves to do it, and they blame it on willpower or motivation. And it's the same with anything in life. It's like, I just have the motivation or willpower to do it. When in actual fact, it goes far deeper than that. And until you start bringing awareness to that and digging into it, you are going to find it really hard to make long-term changes in your life.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like for me, meditation has dramatically changed my life, because as you were saying earlier, it allows you to have that almost step back from the reality that's around you and just be, rather than, letting the stressors from all angles come in. You can almost take that step back and have a few moments and get to know yourself. But another thing I loved what you said there is awareness. And I feel like, awareness is everything in life.
Yeah.
It's you're aware of yourself, whether you're aware of how you speak, whether you're aware of how you move, aware of how you eat. We have to become aware of our actions,
And I think, as Dan's saying that, it is about tying this in is the accountability, being more conscious, so we're not automatic. It's almost like in the gym, metaphorically speaking, you slow the treadmill down, rather than fast-paced mind with the rate of thoughts, as you said, that old program going on. Once we become aware of that, you can tinker with it, change it. And you're right, it's pretty scary stuff, really.
Yeah, it's the it's the reason why getting everything out on paper for a to-do list or whatever it is so effective, because you're basically defragging your brain. You're taking everything that's flying around inside your head and putting it out somewhere, getting it out of there, so you can then look at it and order it, prioritize, and then start taking actions. Like you see, awareness is everything, like you said. With probably a good example is food. When people are trying to lose weight and they're really struggling with it, if you get someone to track what they eat for a week, it's obviously there's a benefit there from people actually physically reducing their calories, but a big component of that, and I don't know what the percentage will be compared to the actual, say, weighing of food, is the fact they're actually bringing awareness to what they're doing. The fact that they have to write down before they eat something, or they're, planning out their food, it forces them to actually confront how much and what they're eating, because it's so easy, human psychology, for us to trick ourselves. And interestingly, even when you do that, there's quite a few studies on it to show how much people underreport what they're eating, even when they're tracking. So we're very good at basically lying to ourselves. I think, coming back to the kind of mindset stuff we do, a big thing that Tom touches on, and a good way that he puts it, we all like to think that we're in control of what's happening, when in reality it's our subconscious narratives that are driving everything. He uses the analogy of, we all like to think we're the kind of president in our heads making decisions, when in actual fact we're the press secretary, and we're just justifying, making excuses for the president's actions. And that's exactly what it is. And until, again, like you said, you bring awareness to exactly what you're doing, how you're acting, then it's hard to make those changes. It's the same with the gym. I actually need to get a video out on it, but the amount of people that I speak to that don't track what they do in the gym, or with whatever training that they're doing, and unless you know what you've lifted or run, or the times you've done the week before, how do you know if you're making progress, or how you need to make changes to make that progress? You don't, because you've got no awareness. You're just guessing, and it applies to everything.
I feel like if you are just guessing everything in life, that can quite allow you to fall into being unmotivated, because if you don't actually know what it is that you're trying to achieve, or what you are achieving, so it's just as important to look at what you've achieved, whether that's with your lifting, whether that's with your business or anything. You can quite easily get wrapped up in here again, and start to fall off and feel that motivation dip.
Yeah, I think it's just, the funny thing about, everyone thinks that motivation comes before you take action, but often it's actually, you get motivated once you've taken action. You need willpower to take the first action, and motivation comes after that. And you can then dig into, you break things down to their smallest component, so that you only need a little bit of willpower to get started. Strategies around all of this stuff. But yes, like you said, if you kind of, and there are two, there's the argument for people who kind of, I don't want to be constrained, just kind of like happy floating through life, which is, absolutely fine. And I think what it really comes down to is understanding the very, if you strip it all the way back, and again, it comes down to your stories and narratives. It's really digging into what means something to you, and where you want to go in life, so that you can put yourself on a path that you're living with authenticity, I guess, to who you are. It's not easy, and everyone starts with varying situations. And, I think a lot of people get trapped in the whole, leave school, get a job, or they have these intentions, and then you kind of get your first paychecks, and then you get that first promotion, and you're kind of on that treadmill, and it's very hard to get off. And the same with relationships. We've talked all about awareness and mindset and this stuff and meditation. I think a lot of people don't like digging into that stuff, because unfortunately, when you do dig into it, some really hard questions have to be answered, and a lot of people don't like the answers. For some people, how many of us have been in a relationship that we kind of know we probably shouldn't have been in, but we've been there for a few years, maybe you've got a house or something like that. And if you really sat down and really asked yourself honestly, is this what I really want? The answer could be, no, it's not. I shouldn't be. I should be doing X, Y, and Z. But that may mean, you're going to have to go through, you're going to have to go through however many weeks or months of kind of real hard emotional times to break that up. Maybe there's all, like I said, houses, financial ties in there. In reality, if you did it, you probably look back in a year, 2 years time, which you see all the time people do, and like, it's the best thing that ever happened to me. I'm so much happier, blah, blah, blah. but to be able to do it in that first place is really hard, which I get. And so a lot of people, even if they're not completely happy in life, they'd rather carry on like that than ask those hard questions and get the answers they don't necessarily want.
I mean, that's a massive point, isn't it, with us all, in whether our relationships with other people or with ourselves. I mean, to grow, actually, you know, you've pointed out we've got to push boundaries to grow, but also, do you think, I know myself personally, I can be quite self-critical. Do you think compassion should be taught a lot more? You know, going back to the education, so we grow and understand ourselves, be a bit more compassionate with ourselves, so that can help us grow, you know, in a direction.
Yeah, I think it's just being, I think everyone, and we see it all the time in the academy with the coaching, how hard people are on themselves. And again, I don't, you know, is this it probably is a general thing across the board. Most people are. And is that something that has come from just education and a cultural thing, that because failure is seen as something that's inherently negative, that we are all really hard on ourselves and not seeing ourselves as, I guess, worthy of whatever it is. So I think, yeah, there's definitely two sides of it, isn't it? I guess it's the yin and yang. It's the balance of the two. If you're too far either way, then you're out of kilter. You need to have exactly the same, you know, you can apply exactly like that. You can apply it with, you can't go hard out on training all the time. You've got to have those periods of rest. The same with work. You can't be full on all the time, because you're not going to be productive. You need to have those periods. You need to be putting the energy in as much as you're putting the energy out.
I suppose because, as you're saying, you're going to become stale, aren't you? Psychologically, physiologically, you've got to take those breaks to get the energy back to move forward the next day.
Yeah, but I think it can be, you know, as you were alluding to, people might not necessarily be within their life, but they'd rather continue, you know, living that life rather than asking themselves the questions to grow.
It's unhappy being unhappy, isn't it?
Yeah, but I feel like as well, like you were saying, you can quite easily get sucked into training too hard too often, working too hard for too long, because you might be trying to avoid some of their area of your life that you don't necessarily want to look at.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. We definitely see that in the academy. And funnily enough, it's actually often harder for us or our coaches to get people to understand, to kind of ease off their training and not try and kill themselves in every session, to make longer term progress. Basically, that step back to go forward. A lot of people, you know, don't understand how. I think people think elite athletes just hammer themselves all the time. You know, it's not. They couldn't perform at the level they do if they did that. They do far more work at lower intensities than people ever realize, but they're very consistent with it, and very smart with it, and the way that they go about it. Because overall, you're looking for longevity as well. You know, the more training that you can get in overall over a week, month, year, the better you are going to be. But if you're hammering yourself all the time and you're getting those DOMs, or injured, or not working on your kind of weaknesses or whatever it is, overall, you're going to have these. You basically, you know, you'll make bits of progress, and then you'll slip back down the ladder to whatever point, and then go up. You'll have this kind of up and down the whole time, as opposed to that steady progress, which is what you're looking for, that constant positive moving average.
Yeah, definitely. Because I suppose that's exactly what we're talking about, with whether that's emotional stress or physical stress from training, or, you know, from the outside. If we don't build our resilience and also understand our own threshold, you know, you won't move forward, because you'll just end up taking too much and then breaking down and coming back down.
Yeah, completely.
So it's been an absolutely fantastic podcast, Simon. Could you give our listeners and viewers 3 tips that they could take away and utilize, so they can either become more emotionally resilient, or correlating with that, just have interventions that they can cope with the stresses that are currently affecting them in their life?
Yeah, I think probably the top three that I'd say is one, having that baseline, understanding that a foundation of good health, is really the cornerstone of everything else. It's on that foundation that everything else is built from. And so the more you can do to work on that, the better every area of your life will be. Because as we were talking about earlier, you're far more resilient to stress. You're far more able to cope with those curveballs that get thrown at you. And on the physical side, you're far more robust as well to picking up those little injuries or niggles, especially as we get older. So the more you can work on that, the better place you're going to be in, I guess, to thrive in other areas. I think, and there's many things to tie into that, but getting good sleep, being conscious about your nutrition and movement. I think everyone gets wrapped up in going to the gym or doing certain exercise. Just for most of us, increasing our movement every day, just walking, would make a huge difference. Something we didn't cover in this, but we see all the time is we've been so conditioned to hit workouts or this kind of like faddy but sold as exciting things that people almost think, tell someone they need to increase the amount they're walking each day, they're like, oh yeah, I kind of agree with you, but that's not really how it works, is it? That's not really going to get me. It's like, no, that will have you increase your baseline activity on a day through lots more walking and you'll notice a big difference. So building a health as a foundation. The second one, I think we've discussed so much in this podcast, is awareness. The more you can work on being aware, whether that is through some form of journaling, and there's many types out there, meditation, even simple, I read, I'm sure you guys have seen it, the Stoic philosophy, the Ryan Holiday book, which is basically each day of the year, there's a kind of Stoic quote from one of the philosophers, and then a little paragraph just kind of explaining that. Honestly, even that simple book, getting that and just reading the one thing each day and taking 5 minutes to think about it, I would argue would make a big difference to a lot of people. So yeah, number two, just bringing awareness. And then number three, I think something that you hit on there is redefining how we see failure and not being hard on ourselves, giving ourselves that break and that opportunity to do things without judging ourselves, which again can be incredibly hard, and you can practice that in many ways. The big thing we always say is start small. You don't want to try and throw yourself so far out of your comfort zone that it's so traumatic that you never want to do it again. It's exposing yourself to small incidences or whatever it is, or little things each day, the small wins that you can take that will help the most with that. So as with anything, you could dig into those three things so much, but if you can take those broad principles and find ways to apply them, then I'd say that they'll definitely help.
I think, and going on to what you just said there, taking the small wins.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we need to remind ourselves of small wins, because we're quite, some of us take action regularly, but I think it's just as important to remind yourself all of the actions that you've taken in life and where you've gone on a regular basis, because I don't think it's done enough to realise how strong you are and what you have achieved.
Yeah, it's small wins. I think everyone's always looking at. In reality, in life, it's never the big events that are really the game changers. And even if it's perceived as a big event, I guarantee if you break it down, it's a series of small events that have just culminated in one single point. It's the whole iceberg effect, isn't it? And it's the small 1%, the small actions that you take on a daily or weekly basis that really add up to make the difference in where you are in a week, a year, or however much time it is. So yeah, completely agree. It is looking for those small wins and really focusing on those rather than get wrapped up and putting everything on hold until you reach this huge big event, whatever that may be.
Yeah, because I think if you reach that big event, if you haven't practiced realizing how, celebrating the wins, that will never feel enough either.
Yeah, you'll always
yeah, exactly. You hit it on the head. It's never, you can't put off. If you're not happy now, you're not going to be happy when whatever it is that happens. It's, you see it time and time again. Everyone talks about it, but I think so many people think that that's nonsense or not true, but it is. If you're not inherently happy, we don't really need, once you've got your basics covered, shelter, food, that kind of stuff, you don't need stuff or whatever it is to happy. If you're not happy because your relationships aren't great around you, or those are the things that bring true happiness. And you don't need tons of cash or to be a certain size or weight, to be that. Obviously all of these things will tie in and make a difference, but at its core, it's if you're not happy right now, then there's things you need to address as you as a person, and I guess the environment that you're in.
Yeah, absolutely. And but yeah, we'd just like to say thank you
very
coming
much
on the podcast.
Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, pleasure. It was it's always good to chat about this stuff, and I'm sure there's tons of things that we could have dug further into there, but hopefully that is useful to people out there.
Well, I'm sure maybe in the future we'll get something else covered with
jump on and dig into it more.
Part 3, yeah.
Part 2.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you for that.
That was brilliant.